Understanding financial aid and student loans is crucial for anyone planning to fund higher education. Whether you're a student, parent, or even an educator, having someone available to help you navigate the complexities of funding higher education is essential. In this episode, we're chatting with Shawn Kithcart-Bulk, Education Funding Specialist at Granite Edvance, about the different types of financial aid available, how to apply for them, and what you need to know about managing your student loans. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Triangle's Making Money Personal podcast, where we engage in real talk about financial matters that affect our community. Today's episode is sponsored by Triangle Credit Union, recently voted Best Credit Union in New Hampshire.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Making Money Personal podcast. I'm Liz here with Terry.
Hello.
And we're super excited to introduce today's guest, Shawn Kithcart-Bulk from Granite Edvance.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Welcome, Shawn.
So, Shawn, we wanted to have you on because you've worked at Granite Edvance for how long now?
A little over 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Yep.
Can you explain a little bit about what Granite Edvance is and what you do there?
Yeah, of course. So Granite Edvance is a nonprofit company out of Concord, New Hampshire. We help students with the college and career pathways, right? Helping students with the college application process, the financial aid process, and the nice thing is it can be any type of student, right? A student straight out of high school, a student in high school trying to make their decision on a career, or even an adult student looking to go back and further their education. So we will help any type of student. We also we offer a private student loan as well. It is a national loan product. And we also offer scholarships to students. We try to give back to those New Hampshire residents. So our scholarship is dedicated to New Hampshire residents, but we do a little bit of everything in the scope of that college preparedness.
So you live and breathe student loans and college funding.
This is a very popular time of year, yes. Yes, for sure.
Okay, I'm just going to go on record in saying that these are my favorite people, right? From a parent's perspective who's, trying to navigate like next steps for, young people coming up and graduating from high school, or as you even mentioned right now, Shawn, like non-traditional students.
Right.
Your organization is just a huge resource, and one that's been very helpful to me personally as a resident of Nashua. So I want to go on record. I'm officially on record now saying that.
Yeah, I feel like for many, many people, the financial aid world, it can be very confusing. It can be, for somebody who's new to it, Terry, you went through it with a couple of your daughters twice already.
Right.
Yeah. So I can imagine how you felt when your kids were entering that stage of life.
Completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, you didn't know where to start, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's nice to have a resource like Granite Edvance available. Now, did you know about Granite Edvance back at the time?
Well, back in the day, you guys were New Hampshire Higher Education Assistance Foundation, right? NEAF.
Or NEAF, yeah.
NEAF, or NEAF.
Keep it simple,
yeah, exactly. And so that's how I knew about Granite Edvance. Yes.
Cool. Yeah. So, Shawn, let's start with just an overall kind of introduction to financial aid. I know you do presentations for students and parents as well, right? So do you mind taking some time just introducing to our listeners a little bit about financial aid in general?
Yeah, so as Terry mentioned, right, it is a little confusing. It can be overwhelming. You go through the college application process. You have that kind of first step. That financial aid piece is kind of that second step, getting accepted, looking for additional scholarships, right? Third step, fourth step, making that actual decision and attending the school of choice. Financial aid, in my opinion, and maybe because I am in it all the time, is very simple. It's just ways to help fund a student's education. And that can come in many different forms, right? That can come in scholarships. Scholarships can come from outside entities, right? Like Granite Edvance. We have a scholarship that we offer students coming in March. There's also merit-based scholarships that they would receive kind of upon acceptance that are renewable based on specific requirements each year. There's also grants, right? We'll start with the free money, I guess, right? Those scholarships are free.
Always start there.
Right,
Always.
exactly. That free money, they do not have to pay scholarships back, right? They may have to maintain specific requirements, but that is free money that they can use. And then you have grant programs. Grant programs can come from the federal government, right, by doing specific financial aid forms. Which I'm sure we'll get into, right? The FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. There's 2 grants there, right? You have big picture, the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant is a federal grant that is based on the information that is figured out by that FAFSA form, right? It produces what's called a student aid index, where if students meet a specific threshold, they could potentially be eligible for this additional need-based grant. Grants can also come from the institution itself. So when you're considering schools, if you get a grant from Colby Sawyer and you get a grant from UNH, they're going to be different grant monies, right? Because all schools have different ways of reviewing that information. And then you get onto the side of kind of self-help aid, right? Those federal loans, those private loans, or work-study options. Those direct federal loans come by, again, completing that FAFSA form, those financial aid forms. And students, depending on credits they have under their belt, they are eligible for a specific amount. They can come in the form of a subsidized loan or an unsubsidized loan, right? Subsidized loan meaning it doesn't accrue interest while the student's in school. The federal government pays that for that student, or in the form of an unsubsidized loan. The unsubsidized loan does accrue interest while that student's in school. It's a non-need-based loan, right? It seems silly to say need-based loan, but that's kind of the difference between the two. And then students could also potentially be eligible for work study. Work study is a program to where it's an allocation, right? So it's not coming off that student's bill, but it is something that a student can work up to for spending money, right? It's on the student to find that job, work those hours, and if they do those things, they get paid in a bi-weekly paycheck, right? You want to go out to eat, you want to go into the city for a fun night out, you can use that money that you get towards those things. But that is something that doesn't come off the bill. Those types of things are typically included in a student's financial aid offer from a school. And then you look at private loans outside of that to cover any balance of 529, paying out of a savings account. So that's kind of the steps when it comes to that financial aid process.
Okay. So you start with searching for scholarships, then you go and you work with the school and see what kinds of packages they have available, kind of thing, and then.
Well, yeah. So you really are applying to college, right? And some schools are merit-based, right? So when you get accepted, you're receiving a merit scholarship with that acceptance. There are other schools that are fully need-based schools that, up front you may not get a scholarship, but you complete your financial aid forms, and based on that, they award you need off of the information on those forms. So what I can say is all schools are different. It's not, I wish it was as simple as saying all schools are going to do it this way. It's just not the case. And so doing a little bit of research prior to, right, when you're in that applying to college stage, understand what forms are necessary, right? Does the school require the FAFSA form? Does it require an additional form that's called the CSS profile, right? A lot of schools that require that form are fully need-based schools, right? So they're trying to get a picture of the student's financial need.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I really like how it's almost like you tiered that for us, Shawn, and that was very helpful. 2 comments. One was the scholarship thing that, as a parent, I would encourage any of our listeners who are in the predicament of having a child go on to college, have them start sooner than later looking for eligible scholarships, right? I mean, I've listened to podcasts before where there's this one student that was her whole entire job, and she ended up getting a full base ride basically because of the scholarships that she discovered and applied for and received. So that was really good. On a follow-up question about the product that you have at Granite Edvance for the lending programs, do you have both a subsidized and an unsubsidized? That's a very hard word for me to say. But basically the 2 different types of loans, or only one loan?
Yeah, so usually you see that subsidized and unsubsidized loan, that's typically coming from the federal government.
Oh, okay.
Right? When you're looking at a private student loan, whether it is Granite Advance through us or you're looking at a Earnest or a Citizens or something through your bank or your credit union, those are typically going to accrue interest the entire life of that
Got
loan.
you. Okay. Alrighty. But you can have, I think right now for my daughter, she goes to school in North Carolina. So we ended up getting a loan through one of their assistant programs down there. It's accruing interest, but she doesn't have to have a payment. There isn't a payment due until like when she graduates,
Right.
I guess, right? That's pretty typical as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of times families have options, right? And a lot of things, right, when you're searching for that private student loan, you want to take into consideration a few things, right? Is credit's obviously a big one, right? What is the credit of the student? Usually because of a student's age, lack of credit, they're most likely going to need that credit-worthy cosigner.
Right.
And a lot of times their credit is what's really going to make a difference. But a lot of times you're also looking at the repayment options. So if a student, for example, for us through Granite Advance, we have 7, 10, and 15-year repayment options, right? So which one you choose could also potentially affect what that interest rate may potentially be,
Right.
but also how you repay it, right? So you mentioned deferring until your daughter graduates.
Mm-hmm.
Students have that option. They also have different options. One is an instant repayment, right? So you would start repaying on that loan come around the springtime, right, of their freshman year, and you would start instantly repaying on that loan. They also have the option of doing interest-only repayment, right? So you're paying the interest on that loan while the student's in school. Or as you mentioned, they have that deferred option, right? Payments don't need to be made until after graduation. Okay. When it comes to that, I kind of try to say, think of companies, these things won't negatively affect interest rate, but things to keep in mind if you want to be a smart borrower, right, of potentially putting money towards that loan prior to that graduation date. Right. Make sure there's no prepayment penalties, right?
Yes.
Do your research on a loan and make sure that has it. Sometimes parents really want a cosigner release, right? So where they take out the loan for 4 years after a specific amount of time, a student could look into potentially having those cosigners released and refinancing that loan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there's other things to keep in mind outside of those areas that would make a private loan a possibility for a student and a family.
Right. Okay. Very good.
Can you describe kind of like the difference between a federal loan versus a private student loan?
Yeah. So the federal loan, you have to do the FAFSA, right? That free application for federal student aid. When a student sits down and completes that, it could potentially make them eligible for a federal student loan, right? If we're talking of a high school student coming right out of high school going into college, that student is most likely going to be eligible for a $5,500 student loan, depending on what their student aid index is, right? The number that is created by that FAFSA form, the school that they're looking to attend, their cost of attendance. That's really going to decide if a student's eligible for a subsidized or an unsubsidized loan. There are limits for subsidized, and then, right, because that's that need-based piece of the loan, and then everything else could potentially be in an unsubsidized loan.
Okay. So for people who are new to all of this, maybe they have a kid in high school, or when do people typically start? Like, when do you recommend a student start looking into doing FAFSA?
Yeah, we do a lot of programming with juniors. We'll talk about the applying to college piece, right? Starting to build that college list and being mindful of what a college could potentially cost, right? Because I think that is an important factor in this decision, just because of the makeup of college right now, right? It is an investment to your education. So doing research early isn't a bad thing, right? The really nice thing that a lot of schools offer are what called net price calculators, right? So these schools have on their websites a tool that you can basically use that shows what a student could potentially be eligible for, right? They can some are pretty simple. Some are a little bit more advanced, right? Where you can put in GPA. It would tell you what your scholarship could potentially be when it comes to merit. It will show you an estimated SAI, right? To show you what you could potentially be eligible for if you're eligible for the Pell Grant or not. So you have a basic understanding, right? One of the things we really emphasize is we don't want students and families looking at that sticker price. We want them looking at the actual net price, right? That sticker price is out there for you to see on the website. Hey, it's going to cost $80,000 for you to attend this school. Not every single student pays that $80,000, right? Because they're getting some form of financial aid to help pay towards their college costs. So we really want to make sure they're focusing on that net price. And then from there, that's part of the conversation, right? If that net price calculator brings the cost down to 20, maybe that's now part of the conversation, right? Maybe that net price calculator shows that school is going to be $50,000. Maybe that's the difference between a school being on a student's list or not, especially if finances is a big part of that college search process. And that's where we start with juniors, right? And then we get a little bit more, there are families that I have worked with over my 3 years that still come back, right? They were juniors freshmen 3 years ago. They're going into junior year next year, and I'm still doing their FAFSA with them. The process has changed for those families a little bit, but it's that ease, that comfort factor that they can say, okay, I know I'm doing this right because I'm working with someone who looks at a FAFSA every day.
Yeah. Who understands what everything's saying.
So when you work with somebody, Shawn, do they typically come in to see you in person, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we try to meet students and families where they're at, right? So we do offer in-person appointments every day, Monday through Friday, and we do offer virtual appointments every day, Monday through Friday. We do have a few staff members that do flex their schedules, so we do offer appointments till 8 p.m. on some nights. So those families that are getting home from work, 5, 6, they have a couple availability slots to get in there and get that FAFSA done. We also do a lot of work inside the schools. We do FAFSA events across the state. We work really hard with our community colleges, right, to offer public events to where those community college students can come and get our support, but also the community, right, offered at Manchester Community College. That's open to all Manchester schools, right? We go into high schools. Me and a coworker were at Manchester Central this morning, right, helping students with their FAFSAs. So we're everywhere. If you're a business out there and you want Granite Edvance to come to your business, we're always willing.
Oh, that's great. That takes a lot of the pressure off right there, honestly. Yeah. For the next round, so this would be going into 2025, like spring of 2025. So is the FAFSA, like when, I know that there are deadlines. Do you have those deadlines for the 2025 year or whatever? Yeah, so one of the other things we talk about with families, especially starting in junior year, is deadlines are extremely important. Right, you're looking at deadlines if you're applying to a school, regular decision, early action, early decision. When the deadlines are for these schools because you want to get accepted, and you want to get accepted in those timelines. It's the same thing with financial aid, right? A lot of times if a student is applying, let's say early action to a school, and that application's due November 1st, a lot of times those financial aid forms are going to be due November 1st, right? A little different. The FAFSA's been opening at different times the last 2 years because of all of the updates being made. Next year, it should be opening on October 1st, right? So we have a little bit more set deadline for next year, right? The fall 26 starting freshmen. But deadlines are extremely important. A lot of schools also have what are called priority deadlines. And typically what that is that they want you to get the FAFSA in by that date or the financial aid forms in by that date. And if you do, it could potentially look different than if you apply after that specific date, right? Maybe you were offered work study if you make the deadline, but after you don't, right? Those types of things. So it's really important to hit those deadlines, even if the school isn't really saying, hey, it's a hard deadline. Hit those priority deadlines. Yeah.
It couldn't hurt, right?
Right.
It'll
the earlier, the better. That's a line I say quite often. But the earlier you can do those forms, the better.
Be proactive.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're rolling right along. But at this point, we're just going to take a quick break to listen to a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. You work hard to safeguard your time and your goals to keep life running smoothly. Don't let identity fraud catch you off guard. Triangle's Better Checking with ID Protect goes beyond banking to protect you and your family from the unexpected danger of identity theft. With Better Checking, you get family coverage that protects parents and children under 25 living in your household, plus identity monitoring and expense reimbursement to make sure any setbacks don't derail your life or your family's lives. Learn more at trianglecu.org. Federally insured by NCUA. And we're back. So we're here talking with Shawn Kithcart-Bulk. We're talking about student loans. We're talking about funding, higher education and all of that. So let's just continue our discussion with like some of the important things that people should know when they're ready to act upon filling out the FAFSA, advancing forward in their financial aid planning, and ways to manage their loan once they've received their funding.
Yeah. I think where we're at when it comes to the timeline of, let's stick with senior year, right? You have those students trying to make their decision, figuring out what school is going to be best for them, trying to narrow down from the 10 schools they've been accepted to down to maybe a top 3 to start comparing to, right? We've hit the financial aid forms, right? The FAFSA form, the CSS profile form. Those are really important things to keep in mind early in the process, right? That starts the process that allows schools to then create what's called a financial aid offer for you. And what this financial aid offer does is it puts together everything that you are eligible for at a specific institution. And all of these financial aid offers are going to look a little different. It's going to be based on, the merit scholarship that you received. A lot of times families get confused, right? They get their acceptance letter. They're so excited. They've been accepted. They get this scholarship with it, and they think that's the financial aid offer, right? That's the first piece of the puzzle. Then that financial aid offer comes, right? And that financial aid offer covers everything. It shows you if you're eligible for those student loans, if you're eligible for that federal Pell Grant. It shows that merit scholarship you received in that acceptance letter. And it really shows you everything. So basically what that financial aid offer is doing is it's taking the total cost of attendance, right? How much it's going to cost you to attend that institution for 1 year. And they take into consideration direct costs and indirect costs. So your direct costs are your billable items, right? Your tuition and fees, room and board. That's what the school is going to charge you. And then it also takes into consideration indirect costs. The indirect costs being, transportation fees, books and materials, miscellaneous expenses, right? Those things they're not charging you. And those things could be, some schools have them listed as $6,000. Right. What the school's trying to do is really just give you a budget for a year, right? What you could potentially spend money on. There are ways to save money on books, right? Yep. Amazon, you can rent books, you can find books free online, you can go to the library, whatever the case may be. But they're just trying to give you that overall net cost. From there, right, you want to kind of take that and, the grants, the scholarships, the loans, the work study, that's on an offer. When you get that net price, you then have to decide, okay, how am I covering that remaining balance if I have one? And that's coming from a few different ways, right? That can come if you have set up a 529 for your student, right? A college savings plan. You can look into using that. I always like to reference the family back to their 529 provider to say, what's the best way for me to use this? Mm-hmm. We can have conversation about it in ways that it makes sense, right? Maybe you want to do a payment plan, right, with it. Payment plans are typically interest-free at schools, right? So you have to pay an enrollment fee. That can range from $30 to $130, right? But that's a one-time fee. And then you're paying monthly, right? So if your estimated net cost is $10,000, you set up a 10-month payment plan, you're paying $1,000 each month, right? That is something you can do, and it doesn't have to be for the full amount, right? You could do a little bit of everything. You can use a little bit of 529 money. You can use a tuition payment plan, and then you could do a private loan, right? You can really do whatever makes the most sense for your family and your financial needs. Mm-hmm. You can also look into private scholarships, right? So for Granite Edvance, we have a private scholarship, right? That is for New Hampshire residents. It opens in March. We're giving out $750,000. to students, and that can be any type of student, right? Are you looking at a trade school? Are you looking at a 2-year school, 4-year school? These type of students are encouraged to apply. I'm part of that process, right? And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun learning about the students in your state, what they are doing for their local communities, for their communities at school, right? Taking the great things they're doing in New Hampshire and taking them to other states. So it's a fun thing to review. I want more kids to apply, so I hope that they do that. I also tell students to check with their school counselors. Talk to your counselor about what opportunities are local, right? There are national scholarships out there. There are local scholarships out there. Just keep in mind, right, you're applying to a national scholarship. There's a lot of people out there, right? So you're going up against a lot of people. Whereas when you stay local and, when you're working with your high school, you're going up against your high school class, right? So the percentage of you potentially winning is much greater than if you apply to a national scholarship, right? Where you're going up against, thousands and thousands of people potentially. There's another good one, New Hampshire Charitable in New Hampshire. Again, it is a scholarship strictly for New Hampshire residents. That scholarship is open now. So there are a lot of different scholarships out there. The one thing I will kind of point out to people is make sure you understand how those outside scholarships could potentially affect your financial aid offer. So sometimes schools, based on costs and everything like that, they could change your financial aid offer based on any outside scholarships that you receive. There's no harm in reaching out to the school to ask, right? They will tell you, they will be upfront to say, this is our scholarship policy. Some schools have it on their website. But it's important to keep in mind, because if you send in a $5,000 scholarship to the school and your financial aid offer changes, you want to know why. You don't want to be shocked after you've, decided on a school and then see that change. Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind with the process.
So if they've already given you that acceptance and the breakdown and everything, and then you apply for a scholarship after the fact, they would kind of go back and revisit.
Could potentially revise that financial aid offer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know in our own personal situation, if we've had any issues whatsoever, not even issues, but questions in terms of stacking what that financial package looks like and how we're going to pay and how much we want to tap into a student loan or whatever, we just contact like the bursar's office. I think it's called the bursar, or the financial aid office at the
student
school.
Accounts.
Student accounts or whatever. And they usually have people who are so willing to kind of like walk that through with you and, answer any questions that you have. So, yeah.
I've worked in a financial aid office, and it's hard to have a conversation with a student when it's about money, right? It's a tight conversation to have, right? These financial aid offices want to help you, and they want to make sure you understand everything that's going on. I encourage students, when they're going through the process of deciding on a school, talk to your admissions counselor. It shouldn't be different when you're having these discussions about money. You should still be able to talk to your financial aid office and have a conversation so that you better understand that process.
Right. So, Shawn, just going back to the scholarship that Granite Edvance has, you said that that's going to be opening in March. Do you already have information on your website about that already, or is that going to come up in March?
Yeah, so we will have information on our website within the next couple of weeks, and that will give a better understanding of what our scholarship entails. We do have a couple of different scholarship categories. Mm-hmm. So students can apply to all four, or they can apply to just one, right? We have academic excellence. We have a leadership and community service. We have different ones that hopefully fit every type of student in the state of New Hampshire. Nice. So we really do encourage everyone to apply and find the best fit for them in those categories.
Okay, great.
That's awesome. So let's kind of just go back to maybe the beginning of this conversation or this discovery phase, where maybe a parent and a student are kind of starting to navigate this. Like, what would determine their eligibility for financial aid in the first place? What are things that they should consider or keep in mind?
You mean like what type of information is used on these forms?
Yeah, like what are they going to need to provide?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So When it comes to the FAFSA form and the CSS profile, and some schools have their own institutional forms that are, I kind of call it a CSS profile adjacent, right? They're going to ask the same questions as most of the forms out there. A lot of times they're looking at, well, all the time, right? They're looking at the student's income. They're looking at, depending on the student's situation, right? If they are a dependent student, they are listing parent information on that FAFSA form. It'll also take into consideration parent income. So for the FAFSA, it looks at prior year tax information. So if, for example, right, the students that will be attending school in the fall of 25, they're completing the 25-26 FAFSA. Okay. The income needed on that form is from 2023. So it's prior year.
Okay.
The reason is who has their taxes done for 2024, right, at this point in time, and the FAFSA opened last year, right? So what I would also suggest too is if in a situation where 2023 looks a lot different, in 2023 you made $100,000 and now you're only making $50,000, that is something to reach out to a school about for what's called a financial aid appeal, right? They want to make sure that they are awarding you financial aid based on current circumstances, right? Loss of a job, change in parent situation, right? They want to take this into consideration when it comes to your financial aid offer. With the CSS profile, it's also looking at income. It's going to look at 2023, last year's, and projected for the upcoming year. So it looks at a lot more income than the FAFSA does. And then they're going to look at assets. So on the FAFSA form, they're looking for amounts in your savings and your checking accounts, any assets you have really outside of retirement, right? Stocks, bonds, money markets, mutual funds. If you have rental properties, second properties, the equity on those. And they are looking for business equity as well. Okay. Same thing on the CSS profile. They're looking for those types of assets. The CSS profile does take it a little bit deeper, right? The CSS profile will ask for retirement account amounts, whereas the FAFSA does not ask for that. It will ask for equity on any primary residence that you own. The FAFSA does not ask for that. So they are a little bit different in the ask. If I were to venture a guess of how long it would take you to complete these forms, I tend to tell people with the FAFSA form, it won't take you more than an hour. It's become really a smart form. So it will look at your income and it will do a lot. It will bring in a lot of information. So the manual importing isn't that important, right? It's all done on the back end. CSS profile, give yourself a couple of hours. It's not something you have to sit down and do in one sitting. It saves as you go. But give yourself 2 hours, right? It asks for a lot of information. You want to make sure you're putting that in correctly. The other thing to keep in mind, too, when it comes to these financial aid forms is really that parent dynamic, right? If there is parents are married, you're going to be listing both parents on those forms. If there is a situation where parents are separated or divorced, the FAFSA is really going to break down and ask what that dynamic is. Look for the parent that provides the most financial support. Whereas the CSS is going to still ask for both parents. That second parent is going to complete what's called a non-custodial form. And it's essentially just them doing the CSS profile as well.
Okay. So would you recommend, go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to ask, so on the CSS, is that filed annually as well?
Yeah, I believe some schools require it that first year, but not additional years. Yeah. Some schools, yes, do require it each year. FAFSA is every year you would have to complete it.
Yes. Okay. So, and I will say from somebody who has done the FAFSA for the last few years, that is now tied to your tax ID number, I think. So they will pull it over once your taxes are done for that year or whatever. And it auto populates.
Yeah, you basically consent to the use of tax information for FAFSA purposes. Yep. And we don't see it, right? If you sit down with us in an appointment one-on-one to do that FAFSA, we don't see it. You don't even see it. It's kind of held on that backside. And when it gets sent to the school can see all that information. Again, it's another way to protect students and families' information, right? Adding that layer of safety in there.
Shawn, I have another follow-up question. So, I'm at the age now where, my husband and I are planning for retirement, right? And so we've got money in retirement, but it's allocated for retirement, whether it's like a 401k contribution or something like that. So do you know, I know it's a little bit outside maybe the scope of what we are talking about. I don't want to get like way in the weeds, but I'm not sure why, like when you're thinking about retirement, why that's a factor in terms of identifying possible monies that's available for colleges. Does that make sense? If that's a valid question?
So what I can say is that it's not asked for on the FAFSA form.
Okay.
So you do not have to list retirement accounts on the FAFSA.
Okay.
It's the one kind of asset that they do not look at.
Okay.
It is asked on the CSS profile, and what I can really say without what I can say that I know,
okay,
right, is that I think sometimes families get this idea in their head that if I'm listing the equity on my second home and it's $1 million home, that the school's going to say, you have $1 million, you can put that $1 million towards your student's education, which isn't factual, right? What they're trying to do, again, is to come up with a student profile, basically, of what their financial need is. These things are taken at different percentages, and I don't know those percentages, so I'm not going to speak on it. But they're taking at different percentages to create this profile for the student. So I wouldn't get tripped up too much on, they're asking me for this because they're just going to say I have enough money to just pay out of pocket.
Yeah.
They're not looking at it like that, right? A majority of those numbers are going to be based off of income.
Okay, perfect.
It's a little bit of a relief there because
it
might make you like a little averse to listing stuff, but it's like you said, Shawn, it's not factored necessarily the way that you think.
Right.
They're looking at it from a different perspective. Okay, well, let's go into, so people who get approved, get their loans all set up, get all the funding, how do you recommend they best manage that? I mean, I think you talked a little bit about, Terry, about when you start paying them back. I mean, it sounds like there's like differences in between that, but like how do you recommend a student and a parent kind of prepare themselves for the repayment or the managing of their loans or their aid?
Yeah, I mean, I think a great place to start is to say, don't be afraid to contact your lender. I think sometimes there's a lot of people that just don't want to have a conversation because it's a scary conversation to have, right? Knowing what repayment is. So don't be afraid to talk to them. Now, when it comes to federal loans, right, there are different repayment options, right? And that's something that they can view at any time at studentaid.gov, right? They can go out, do that, see, right? Maybe they're doing a standard repayment, an income-driven repayment. Go and see what those look like. When it comes to those private loans, those types of repayment options are going to be set up when you're taking out that loan. So you're going to kind of know what that looks like going in. I always want students and parents to be proactive when it comes to those student loans. So understanding, right, even if you defer that loan till after that student graduates, try to make payments on it, right? Because if we're taking out a private loan and that student is the one listed on it, but they have a cosigner in their parent or grandparent or whoever decided to cosign with them, making those payments early, if there's no penalty there, is going to build that student's credit, right? So we're taking a negative of educational debt in the big scheme of things, right? It's an investment, so having some educational debt isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I want students to understand how much that could, right? Because they're taking out a loan for 4 years. That loan's sticking around for more than 4 years, right? That loan's around for 7 more years, 10 more years, 15 more years. I want them to understand how that's going to affect them in years, but also monthly payments. That monthly payment's going to be different. If we're looking at it now and you can't afford the monthly payment for a 7-year term, maybe you look at a 15, right? But understand that you can make those payments. I tend to tell students, right, hey, you got work study on your bill. You come home or work for the summer. You make $3,000 during the summer, put $1,000, $1,500 towards your student loan. then you're paying down that loan. So when you graduate, you're coming out with less debt. There are ways to save too while you're in school, right? Those private scholarships. You can apply to those. You can apply to Granite Advance scholarship every year, right? So that is something that you can get each year if you put in the work for that, right? And you receive that. You could also look into different programs on campuses. I know some campuses that offer, right? You get a job with residential life and housing, right? You become an RA, you oversee a floor, you put in that work, you get room and board, at a discount or for free. Those types of things can help students throughout the 4 years to keep those costs down. So I think it's more so knowing how it could potentially affect you, because you should know that prior to starting that repayment on that loan.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing some of it is like when you're initiating the funding, look into the requirements, look into the plans, look into the term length, all that stuff. So be aware of all of those things.
And I think it's really important, when it comes to a private student loan, it's a little different. You have to be there as the student, right? You're signing for a loan, you're taking care of that. But that should also be the case with the FAFSA form too, right? When we sit down with families to complete the FAFSA form, we have the student, we have the parent, we have those people with us so that they understand, that we can say, these are your loans. This is a loan that you could potentially use, right? When we sit down financial aid offers, this is your loan. This is solely in your name, right? This loan has you and mom. These are things that you need to keep in consideration because it's going to affect you after college. Yeah. So be mindful and put the work in. You can have fun and do work at the same time when you're in college, right? Yeah. So we want to make sure that they understand that.
Well, at this point, we're kind of running low on time. So is there anything else you wanted to share before we kind of wrapped up into our next segment?
No, I think we're good.
Well, okay, let me rewind that for a sec. So before we go into our next segment then, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with our listeners if someone's interested in contacting you, if they want to get in touch, if they need more resources, where would you send them?
Yeah, so, the best place to go is our website, graniteadvance.org. You can go there. It has a lot of different resources, right? Applying to college, covering costs. We have a great tool that shows you the 4-year costs, right? You can put in your information from that financial aid offer and see what that cost is. We use that tool a lot in our reviewing financial aid offers. When you go there, there is a section that says contact us, and it takes you to our Calendly link. Families can use that link, sign up for an appointment, and it puts you in contact with one of the counselors. Again, virtual options, in-person options, and go and check out what we have, right? You're unsure of a major. We do use science assessments, right? Helping them kind of determine that career trajectory. Review, right? Haven't done a FAFSA yet. We can sit down and help you with that. You want to go over different ways to cover the cost of college. We can sit down and do that with you. If you want to bring Granite Edvance to your business, you can come and sign up for a presentation. So a lot of really good resources out there. If you want to look into our Granite Edvance loans, right? You're a New Hampshire resident, that's on our website, right? That shows you all of our interest rates and a lot of really good resources.
Awesome. Yep. Great.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. We're super excited that you're here. Thank you again for taking time. We're going to go into our next segment now. Okay. And this is our rapid fire segment. This is just the fun segment where we get to know a little bit more about Shawn. Okay. So Terry's going to facilitate this one.
Okay. So Shawn, if you want, I'm going to do like an either or, and you just answer. If you want to, embellish on your answer, that's fine too. So, okay, here we go. Number 1, Hampton Beach or North Conway?
North Conway.
Game night or movie night?
My wife would say game night, but I'm going to say movie night.
Steak or seafood?
Seafood.
Yes. History Channel or the True Crime TV?
Oh, man, that is a hard one. Dual screens.
I love it. Staycation or vacation?
Vacation.
Sneakers or sandals?
Sneakers.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee. All day. Yeah.
Skiing or snow sledding?
I'd probably hurt myself skiing, so I'll say sledding. Yeah.
Pizza or tacos?
That's another hard one. I'm from New York, so I'm going to say pizza.
Very good. Excellent. Well, you did great. 100%. Well
Cool.
done. Well done. Thanks,
Cool.
Shawn.
Of course.
Yeah,
Thanks for
okay.
having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And anybody listening, if you have any questions or need more information, visit them at graniteedvance.org.
With an E.
With an E, Advance. Yep, correct. And we just want to thank you so much for coming in and
Absolutely.
taking
This
time.
is fun. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Great to
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
That wraps up this episode of the Making Money Personal podcast. If you've enjoyed today's show, we would love to hear from you. Email your thoughts about this show or any other ideas at tcupodcast@trianglecu.org. Thank you to all of our subscribers, and if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss out on any new episodes or money tips. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.